Walter, there's a lot of people who know your works, know who you are, and there's a lot of people that I would love to introduce you to en masse, of people that I don't even know. I'm just talking about whole new generation of young people, to find out who you are. So that's going to be the demographic. Okay. But we'll have you cover it. But for the most part, though, just to kickstart, I see here that you hold the Harold E. Worth Eminent Scholar Chair in Economics, and that you studied, you got a BA in philosophy.
Yes, that's right.
Brooklyn College.
Right, right.
And a PhD in economics, right?
At Columbia, yes.
Yeah, and you find that there's a lot of young people, aside from getting tattoos and going to mosh pits, there's a lot of people out there who are hungry and thirsty for answers. Do you find that with a lot of young people?
Well, I teach at a university, and the kids stay about the same age. I get older.
Yeah.
They're about the same age for the last 20 years at Loyola, and I've been teaching for maybe 50, 55 years. So
Yeah.
I've gone through a lot of generations of students.
And those students, is there a common thread that you find out throughout them? Like, do they have like a thirst for understanding, like getting a worldview, or is it just all very pragmatic? This is like a very practical feeling. You get money in here, or do you see like young ideological blood boiling to the surface?
Well, sometimes I think I never taught anyone anything, but I provoke the hell out of people. Because my way of teaching is to challenge students, and I like to discuss and argue with them. And I would say 1/3 of students really like me.
Yeah.
1/3 of students really hate me. And then there's another third of students that are indifferent.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with students that I've had in the 70s and in the 60s. So I've been through many generations, and everyone says, well, the modern students are no good, and in our day they were much better. I don't see any real difference between the different generations. They're all about the same. Some are very inquisitive and studious and are open to liberty and good economics, and others hate it. They're Marxists or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's a third group that is pretty indifferent, and they just take my courses because they're required and they want to graduate.
Right. Okay. The pragmatist. We're just going to get through this, and I'm on to something else. Whereas other people will take up arms. But even before we get there, one thing I'd like to know, like you personally, just to bring us back to inspired youth yourself. You got a BA in philosophy, yeah, and a PhD in economics. There you are, maybe you're a very young teen, maybe younger, I don't know. Like, how did you get interested to going in that path? Philosophy and economics.
Well, when I was a kid, I'm Jewish. I was brought up in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn Jews are all pinko, commie, I don't know what, lefties, progressives, liberals, and I was one. For example, I went to school with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And he and I overlapped for 4 years at Madison High School and 1 year at Brooklyn College, and my views were roughly the same as his. Communist or socialist or whatever.
That was the general zeitgeist of your area of people.
Absolutely. I mean, Jews vote, 95% for the Democratic Party? It was like that then.
Yeah.
So I just took on the coloration of my neighborhood. I was more interested in sports and girls then. I wasn't really interested in politics.
Yeah.
But I was a socialist. And then Ayn Rand came to Brooklyn College to speak, and I wanted to boo and hiss her. Now, in those days, you didn't really hit people like Charles Murray, Heather McDonald. They speak, and the lefties, they'll physically abuse them.
These days.
These days.
Yeah.
But in those days, this is in the 50s, early 60s, you didn't do that. So I would politely boo her because she favored free enterprise and capitalism, and everyone knows.
And let's put this, before you get there, let's put this in perspective. Okay, you're not a 40-year-old man when this was happening. You were a kid.
I was.
You were still an undergraduate. This was like 1963. Okay.
Well, 1963, 1964, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I was 22, 21, 19, somewhere in there.
Right.
and she came to speak, and I booed and hissed because capitalism is evil. I mean, you'll have starvation, you'll have unemployment, you'll have very bad things if you have capitalism.
Right.
And then afterward, there was an announcement that there would be a lunch in her honor,
That's right.
and anyone could come, even if you disagreed. And I wanted to convert her to socialism. And so I went to the lunch, and Ayn Rand was sitting at the head of the table, and her cohort, Leonard Peikoff and Alan Greenspan and Nathaniel Brandon,
Yeah.
were sitting at one end of the table, and there was no room there. So I went to the other end of the table, and I turned to my neighbor and I said, this capitalism stuff is evil, socialism is the way to go. And he said, well, I don't really know that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. And there must have been 50 people on the side, so it was a long, long table.
Yeah.
So I went up and I stuck my head between Ein's and Nathan's, and I said, there's a socialist who wants to debate someone on socialism and capitalism. And they said, who is it? I said, me. And Brandon was very, very nice. He said,
Yeah.
look, I'll discuss it with you. You can't sit here. There's no room. But I'll come to the other end of the table and I'll talk to you under two conditions. One condition was we don't let this conversation lapse until we settle it. And the second one is I promised to read two books. One was Atlas Shrugged, and the other was Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt.
Yes.
And I started reading those books, and boy, oh boy. I mean, Atlas Shrugged is about that thick, 1,200 pages. It took me maybe a weekend to read it. I couldn't put it down. It was magnificent. And then I I read Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. And then I
The
went...
thinner volume.
The thinner volume, yes. Everything's thinner than Atlas Shrugged. And I went to Brandon's house and Ayn Rand's house. I took my roommate with me sometimes, Ben Klein, a professor at UCLA. And I was converted. I was then a free market advocate.
Yeah.
I wasn't really an objectivist. They were a little too cultish for my tastes.
Yeah. Just so far as the economics is concerned, which objectivism adopted from other thinkers, really, but broadly free market. Yeah. I find that fascinating. That what chutzpah you had. There's this prominent woman, and you're going to tell her what's what. Like yes, a firecracker there.
I wanted to convert her to socialism.
Yeah. So I can tell, just by that though, I can tell like you're very passionate about ideas, to be that fired up in the first place. So
Yeah.
even as a teenager, for you to it was philosophy that you first took, and economics was later. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I started out in philosophy, and then when I graduated, I was really unsure what was the best vehicle to promote liberty, because I got the bug. I wanted to promote liberty,
Yeah.
and it was either philosophy or economics. So I was unsure. So I enrolled in a master's program in philosophy in Brooklyn College, and an economics master's program at City College.
Yeah.
And each semester I would take 2 of this and 3 of that, or 4 of this and 1 of that.
And this is after your conversion.
Oh yeah, after
Yeah,
my
okay,
conversion.
you're going to school.
And then I decided it was economics.
Right.
And then I went to Columbia and got the PhD.
Right. Yeah. And that's the economics is something that was considered more practical than philosophy, but you've always had the philosophical nature, though.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, after meeting Ayn Rand, and we'll just kind of have to take it for granted that the audience will have to look her up to see who that is, or may very well be a notorious figure already, and Nathaniel Brandon and Alan Greenspan, so, of all people, later on became the treasurer.
Head of the Fed.
Head of the Fed. How long was it after that incident at the luncheonette that you met Murray Rothbard, and how did you meet him? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I'm now at Columbia, and Larry Moss is in my class, and he says, you got to meet this guy, Murray Rothbard. He's an anarchist, an anarcho-capitalist. I said, anarchist? Anarchist is evil. Because remember, I was a Randian, and they are very much against anarchism.
Right.
They
But so beyond the free market theories, you did have some objectivists.
Well,
Even though you can criticize the cult-like behavior, which I hate too.
yeah,
by the way.
I didn't like the cult behavior, but I swallowed their political economy. Namely, you needed a government,
Yeah.
armies to keep foreign bad guys off of us, police to keep local bad guys off of us, and courts to tell who the good guy and who the bad guy
And you were
are.
in that position even when you were a socialist, right? Yeah, we need a government.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
but the socialist government is a lot more
Yeah.
expensive.
Well, yeah, but still a
than,
government.
than
Yeah.
the Randian government.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to meet Murray. And Larry Moss kept saying, but you'll love Murray, he's great. And then his roommate, Jerry Wallows, ganged up on me. The two of them ganged up on me and they bullied me into meeting Murray. And I met Murray, and Murray converted me to anarcho-capitalism in about 5 minutes. What he did, it was very sneaky. He used Henry Hazlitt against me. See what I got.
Maybe a hero that you were reading.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
What I got from Henry Hazlitt is that the reason we have pretty good shirts and shoes and lima beans is because of competition. You know, if you're making a lousy shirt, I'll go to someone else and buy a shirt. Yeah. So what Murray says, well, why can't we apply that to police or to courts? And I couldn't think of a great reason why not. So the light bulb went over my head, and I was now an anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah.
The Austrian stuff took me like 2 years more to convert to. I really had trouble with that because for me, Austrianism means that in economics there are certain statements that are not merely empirical, but are apodictic necessary truths. And I figured if it's an apodictic necessary truth, it's just a tautology.
Yeah.
It tells us about how we're using words.
Yeah, the dog chasing its own tail. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if there are empirical statements that tell us about the world, but to have the combination of a synthetic a priori, it just blew my mind, and I really couldn't get it for a long time. Hayek never got it. He said he couldn't follow Mises down that garden path toward the synthetic a priori. Well, you know, there are many synthetic a priori statements, like man acts. Try denying that man acts, and it's an act. So you're sort of stuck with it. Or the minimum wage law creates unemployment in equilibrium for people whose productivity is lower than the minimum wage. That's necessarily true. Now, you can do empirical econometric work, but all you're doing is illustrating that. You're not testing it. Whereas the mainstream thinks you're testing apodictic statements, whereas we Austrians don't think in that way.
Yeah, so in regards to that, before you were converted to that, then you were more of the classical approach?
Yeah,
Right.
I was a follower of Milton Friedman. Gary Becker was my teacher at Columbia.
That's right. You did your dissertation on rent control.
Yeah, with Gary Becker.
Now, before we get too deep in there, let's just take a step back because we don't want to step into in the middle of the
Deep
deep waters. Yeah, yeah. But let's define. Now, Murray Rothbard is a name in himself. That's just another name that people will have to look up to find out what he's about. Now, he was known the moniker of Mr. Libertarianism, right? How about we talk about that just as a basic definition? What is libertarianism? And then we establish that much before we talk about its theories in economics, right?
Okay, libertarianism for me, and if you ask 10 libertarians, you'll get 11 different answers. But for me, what it is a theory of what is just law.
Yeah.
It asks only one question, what is just law? And it gives only one answer, namely, just law is predicated on the non-aggression principle. What's the non-aggression principle? You can do anything you damn well please, just don't grab other people or their property without their permission. So the only legitimate acts are buying and selling and renting and lending and borrowing and stuff and gift giving. Yeah. But murder, rape, theft, arson, very, very bad, and people should go to jail or be punished if they violate the non-aggression principle. But you really need the other side of the libertarian coin of the non-aggression principle, and that's how do you get property rights in the first place? Like, why do you own that body that's sitting over there? And why do I own this shirt?
Are you saying my body is not me?
Well, I'm questioning it, and there are theories that you could sell it, sell yourself into slavery. Yeah. But the libertarian of my ilk, and I follow Rothbard on this, is the way you get to own things in the world is by homesteading. You mix your labor with virgin territory.
No, the Lockean approach.
John Locke, yes. Yeah. And now you own it. And then Robert Nozick, another famous libertarian, says, well, any other voluntary interaction would be justified. So, example, I domesticate a cow and I have milk. You put in a corn crop And you own the corn and I own the milk, and now we trade. And now I own the corn even though I didn't produce it, and you own the milk even though you didn't produce that. But we can trace it back to voluntary trade and then homesteading. So those are the two principles of libertarianism. And if you are rabid and maniacal and have libertarian glasses and look at the world through those two spectacles, you then determine, well, should prostitution be illegal? Well, no, not between consenting adults.
Victimless
Crime.
Yeah, crime.
And,
Quotations.
And should we have a minimum wage law? I now want to hire you for $3 an hour. You know, I can go to jail for that because the law says minimum wage is, I don't know, $15 an hour or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I now offer you a job for $3 an hour.
And that person wants to take it because they want to get the experience, whatever. That's a decision. Yeah.
Right. So the libertarian part of me would say, well, that's unjust. It's an unjust law. The economics part of me would say, well, that's going to create unemployment, but that's a different issue.
Create unemployment?
The minimum wage law? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's
yes.
arguments in favor of that. Yeah. When it comes to economics altogether, whatever the class of school, though, this is my thought, which is probably will sound laughable to you, but I don't know. But to me, free market economics is just really based on that human beings are naturally need to gather, and there's a division of labor, there's specialization. If you don't have that, there is no economy that can work whatsoever. And in order to have a division of labor and specialization, people need to be free in order that there is that kind of, this is how people naturally interact with one another. It's just very organic.
Well, you could have a Robinson Crusoe economy. Robinson Crusoe's on an island by himself, and he picks berries and grabs a fish, and there's an economy there. So you could have an economy. It wouldn't be
one person?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Namely, he picks berries and fish and whatever.
Oh, I thought it would be like the interaction of like a multitude of people.
Well, that would be a more complex economy, but you could have a single person and call it an economy.
Right.
He economizes. He might build a boat or not build a boat based on whether he could get more fish with a boat, and even though it's going to take him a while to build a boat. So he has to decide whether to grab fish like a bear or to get a net or a hook or a boat or whatever. So there's an economy with one person. It's not a very sophisticated economy, and he's not going to be very rich.
Yeah.
But you're quite right that if you want to have a civilized economy, then you have to have specialization, division of labor, which means, I can make shoes all day. And I'll get pretty good at making shoes because I'm making shoes all day. And you make shirts all day.
Yeah.
And you'll get pretty good at shirts. Whereas if you have to make shoes and shirts and everything else, like Robinson Crusoe, you'll be a jack of all trades but a master of none.
Yeah.
Namely, we won't be very rich.
That probably sounds like more like of a Marxist approach. You can be all these different things, like.
Yeah, Marx said in the morning you should make shirts, in the afternoon you should philosophize, in the evening you should be a doctor or something.
So that's in the Marxist economics is like we'll turn the Austrian approach right on its head then.
Well, that part of Marxism, if that's what you want, you'll just be a little poorer than you would otherwise be. But in the free society, you don't have to specialize. You could be a farmer in the morning and make shirts in the afternoon and a philosopher in the evening. You're not going to be as good at any one of those things as you would be if you specialized.
Yeah, less time.
But, if that's what you want to do, God bless.
Yeah, okay, ultimate about
the problem with Marxism is not that, people do different things. And most people, just have one job. The problem with Marxism is he believes in the labor theory of value.
Yeah.
Namely, things are valuable insofar as labor is inputted into them.
Yeah.
But, I can pick up a diamond as big as my fist with virtually no labor.
Yeah.
And it's worth a lot even though there's no labor in there.
Yeah.
Or I can make a mud pie and a cherry pie with an equal labor, and yet the mud pie is not worth much. The cherry pie is worth.
Okay. The labor theory of value. That's very interesting. I'd like to, I got a thought on that, but I'd like to get back to the Murray Rothbard and the Rand thing. As far as that's concerned, I think this whole thing about them, they see that the workers, those guys who are actually doing the physical labor, they don't think about like intellectual labor. They just think of the physical labor. The guys who are sweating and flexing the muscles. That's work. That's the work, right? So this whole exploitation idea is based on, I think, his materialism, because the mind doesn't exist. It's just the body. So it's the bodies that are being enslaved. And the fat capitalist pig, he's not working. He's not working because there's no such thing as intellectual work, because the mind doesn't exist. So everything is body, and it's the physical laborers who are the exploited class. And that's how it all mingles with his more esoteric, abstract ideas,
Well,
I
I
think.
think Marx would allow for intellectual labor. He would say a teacher is, producing something and it's intellectual.
But he's dependent on the guys who build him the school to teach out of. That's the argument that I hear from leftists.
Well, there is the physicality part, but
Yeah.
I think a more sophisticated Marxist could acknowledge that a doctor is mostly giving you information. I mean,
Yeah.
a little bit of he's doing surgery on you, but a lot of what a doctor does for you is he say, well, you should take this medicine, not that medicine, or you should do this, not that. So doctors and lawyers and teachers are intellectuals, and I think Marx, sophisticated Marxists, would allow that is legitimate labor. The problem is that labor is not the only thing that creates value. There's other things like
Sentimental value?
well, the mud pie and the cherry pie have equal labor in them, and yet one is valuable and the other isn't.
Oh, yeah.
So labor could hardly account for all of value.
Well, of course not. Imagine like digging a hole and then filling it in and digging it again and digging
Right.
a hole. It's physical, right?
That's Keynes who would say that's great labor. So the Marxist is saying that like if I buy your shirt for $10, we're each exploiting the other. Because the reason I'm buying your shirt for $10 is because I value the shirt at more than $10.
Yeah.
The reason you're selling it to me at $10 is you value it less than $10. So we're both making a profit. And for them, profits are evil. So the whole Marxist system is a little ludicrous.
Well, yeah. But just now drawing back, though, to the meeting Ayn Rand, significant names that I encourage people to look up, as well as Murray Rothbard. Now, drawing back to the 60s again, there was a falling out between the two. Like, where did Rand get? They're all talking about natural theories and free markets. This is where the Murray Rothbard and the ANCAPs, short for anarcho-capitalists, and Rand. What's the clash? Why was there any kind of fallout if they're both are advocates of liberty, freedom, natural rights theory?
Well, Murray was part of the Ayn Rand group before
Certainly.
I met Murray.
Yeah.
And she booted him out. Why'd she boot him out? Because part and parcel of objectivism is atheism. Now, Murray happens to be an atheist, but his wife, Joey, was not an atheist.
Yeah.
So Ayn Rand was very generous and gave Murray a year to convert his wife to atheism, and then told him if that he failed, then he'd have to divorce her. And Murray probably fell on the floor laughing. I mean, this is ridiculous. He's going to divorce his wife because they disagree on atheism. So that was a big impetus, part of why they parted from each other.
Yeah.
Another was anarcho-capitalism. Ayn Rand considers libertarians hippies of the right.
Yeah.
I can see why she says that. We sort of are on the right, although I don't think that libertarians are really on the right. I reject the left-right spectrum.
Yes, as I.
So I don't think we're right-wingers at all. But there were
God,
two.
no.
I'm sorry.
God, no.
Right, God no. So there were really two issues dividing Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard. One was she ordered him to divorce his wife if he couldn't convert her to atheism, which is preposterous.
Did he come to you with these kind of conversations? And say, Walter, I just can't believe.
No, this occurred before I met Murray.
Oh, okay.
So I heard about this later.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. You heard about, and he would, but that's what I mean, though. He would tell you these stories. Like
Oh yeah,
this?
well I heard the stories from him, from his followers. I was part of the Murray Rothbard living room crowd.
Yeah.
Murray would have seminars or gatherings, coffee clutches.
Well, yeah. Can you imagine some of those conversations? Because I can imagine that there would have been like some pretty serious clashes, like talking about like anarchism and the necessity for a small government.
Oh,
I'm sure they had really heated arguments.
in the Murray Rothbard living room?
Yeah, Murray and Rand.
Oh, when they
Then.
were together, there were clashes, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Right, but I was never part of that. That was before I met Murray.
yeah,
But now I'm talking about Murray's living room crowd
yeah, yeah. Later on, yeah, yeah.
later on after I met Murray. And there, the big problem was stomach cramps. Murray was so funny. I mean, he had you in stitches for hours. He was just a great raconteur, and we played Risk and we played chess.
Why does
and-
everybody think intellectuals are just serene, tight, austere people only? You know,
No, Murray was viciously funny. I mean, I would get stomach cramps from laughing. It was horrible. No, I don't think it was horrible, but it was an honor. I mean, I would be reading Man, Economy, and State during the day, and then I'd go to his house at night, and I was just in heaven.
Yeah, cracking jokes. Did you meet Rand on other occasions besides the luncheon? Did you have any other interactions with
see,
him?
what happened when I was in my Ayn Rand phase,
Yeah.
I would sort of schizophrenic approach avoidance. They were the only libertarians I knew, or the only free market people I knew. So I'd come there, and then if you asked Ayn Rand a question like, well, on page 42 of Atlas Shrugged, you said this, could you elaborate on that? That would be a perfectly good question.
Yeah.
But if you said on page 42 of Atlas Shrugged, you said this, but on page 900 you said that, and I see a contradiction, she would say, get out.
Any challenge or any
Challenge, she would kick you out. I mean, so then I would leave in disgust. And then
You got a bad taste in your mouth
yeah,
afterwards,
I mean,
imagine.
that's not cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's horrible. So then I didn't know any others, so 6 months later I'd come back.
Yeah.
And then I'd be disgusted and I'd leave. And then when I met Murray, I had a whole new group of friends.
Yeah, I can see
And
the
I
attraction.
never went
there.
back to the,
More accepting and yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, like moving on onto the path that you took with the economics, your most noteworthy book, I guess, that put you on the stage would be Defending the Undefendables.
Yeah.
And now you have two more books under the same title, 2 and 3.
Yeah, the first one came out in 1976. That was my first book. And then I had one in 2009, Defending 2, and then Defending 3 just came out last year in 21.
Okay. Now, all of those books, we can talk a little bit about them too, but all of those books, though, are coming from a libertarian perspective and natural rights and the non-aggression principle. They would apply through all the books at all times. In fact, defending the undefendable really makes a strong case to the pushing edge to see how far the non-aggression principle, if properly understood, can go and what that means. And I find that fascinating. I, like you, have a similar history with getting enthralled with objectivism and being disgusted by things and changing my minds on some things and things that I still retain, that I took from it. One thing that I still stick to that led me onto the path of anarcho-capitalism would be the non-aggression principle, which I understand to be that the only way to violate it comes down to physical force. That's how you violate that principle. It's physical force. Like the big daddies on the table obviously are murder, rape, theft, kidnapping. And people are in agreement with it. Yeah, those are violent, obviously in-your-face crimes. But then, when you start talking about issues like taxation, then all of a sudden the principle just dissolves into fog, and they don't really understand the principle. Then
Yeah.
So that's what you find with a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? So
Well, it's physical force or the threat thereof. For example, right now, I'm going to just speak. I'm going to say, if you don't give me $100, I'm going to shoot you. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, I don't mean that. But if I meant it seriously, that would be a crime, even though there was no physical force, because I didn't shoot you.
Right.
But I threatened. So it's either physical force or the threat thereof.
Or taking money off of somebody's counter. They don't know about it.
Right.
Maybe they don't even miss it.
I'm a pickpocket, or I engage in fraud.
Indirect use of force. Yeah.
Well,
you could
I
say.
don't know if you want to call it force. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But if I pickpocket, I'm very delicate. You didn't even feel it. And if I write a bad check,
Yeah.
there was no physical violence. I don't think. I'm not sure about that. But I took $100 out of your bank account.
Yeah.
Without your
Intent
permission.
matters too. You meant to do that, not because like a rubber check. Oh, I made a mistake.
Oh,
Sorry.
well,
Yeah,
if you make
yeah.
a mistake, it's not really a
Yeah.
crime. It's a tort.
Intent. Yeah. Yeah. So so that's how rights are violated, right? So it is through the physical force. Now that is basically speaking. That is not individual rights, or what the Randians or the objectivists would speak to the high heavens about, of course, which I agree with, is not recognition of individual rights. The same thing as the non-aggression principle, right? They are exactly on the same page here, right? And I don't understand how the objectivists can't see that taxation is involuntary.
That's the essence of the anarcho-capitalist point of view.
Yeah.
Not only is government inefficient, but it's also a violation of rights, because we didn't agree to pay taxes.
Right.
If you would agree, then it wouldn't be taxes. It would be defense agency payments, or you hire a detective, or you hire a private guard,
Yeah.
and you agree to pay him. Well, that's not a tax.
Right.
So a government really does two things that are improper. One is it taxes people. It compels them to pay for things against their will, which is called theft. And also it prohibits you from hiring anyone else. And also a third one is it prohibits you from seceding down to the individual level. So for example, we're now in Canada,
Yeah.
and
Vancouver, beautiful British Columbia.
beautiful British Columbia. And if British Columbia wanted to secede from Canada, they would have the right to do it. By the way, Quebec
Was this Crown land? They can.
Yes, they say it's Crown land. And if Vancouver wanted to secede from British Columbia, that would be legitimate. And if somebody wanted to secede from Vancouver, like you live in Vancouver, you should be able to secede. Namely, secession down to the individual level would be equivalent to anarcho-capitalism. But the key, so there are really three problems. One, they have compulsory taxation. They make you pay for things that you didn't agree to pay for.
Yeah.
Secondly, they demand a monopoly of legitimate force in a geographical area. And third, they won't let you secede from them and keep your property.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because they then talk about unjustified account of property rights, where they stick a flag. And this whole massive spread of land is ours, right? Yeah, with no toil or anything like that. Just we put a flag here. You know.
Well, look, there are parts of Canada that no human being has ever been at.
Yeah.
So how can Canada claim ownership of that? Not on the basis of Lockean homesteading theory, anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and that has relevance to this whole question. So, and that's what this book is about. Is now like the other. Word that has such negative connotations would be, besides anarchism, would also be privatization, profit or private property and whatnot. And that's what you're dealing greatly with in understanding the non-aggression principle, individual rights, how governments in fact are in violation of the very thing that they're said to be set up to protect. Some governments, not all. Some of them just because we said so. We rule you, period. Divine right of kings, right? This is not like a democracy or whatever. So you have all of that. What are some of the books that you have written that deals with the implementation of property rights and individual rights across the board, and perhaps even got you into hot water in controversial circles of prostitution, why that should be criminalized, a person, things like that. How do you, and also the other books that you've written in terms of privatization of the roads and whatnot. Can you speak of that? That would be
Sure.
great.
Well, let me speak about defending the undefendable. There are 3 books of it, and each one has got about 35, 40 chapters, all different ones. But what they have in common is that if there's an act that is either illegal or hated by everybody, and yet doesn't violate the libertarian axioms or principles,
Yeah.
I defend it. For example, prostitution. Now, look, I don't favor prostitution. I don't go to prostitutes. I wouldn't want my daughter or my wife or my mother or my sister to be a prostitute.
I wish that those people would choose a different career
Yeah.
path.
But if they were a prostitute, the question is, should they go to jail? Did they violate the non-aggression principle? And the answer is, between consenting adults, they didn't.
Yes.
Now, another interesting one is I defend blackmail. Now, a lot of people think that blackmail is something that should be against the law. And what I do is I distinguish blackmail from extortion. And in both cases, in both blackmail and extortion, there's a threat and there's a demand for money. Now, in extortion, the threat is, give me your money or I'll kill you.
Oh, well, that's different.
That's very bad. Whereas in blackmail, the threat is, give me your money or I'll gossip about you.
Yeah. Well, I got some photos.
I'm sorry?
I got some photos you don't know about.
Right. I've got some photos. You're married and you were with this lady and you shouldn't have been with that lady. And if you don't give me $100 or $1,000, I'm going to show your wife that picture.
Yeah.
Well, do I have a right to show your wife that picture? You're darn tootin' I do.
Might make you a bastard.
It might make
But
me
you're not violating the law.
But I'm not. That's precisely it. I'm not violating rights by gossiping. I now say you're a bum, or you take a bath with a rubber ducky, or whatever I accuse you of, and I say if you want me to shut up, give me money. Well, look, gossip is legal.
Yeah.
So to threaten something legal, namely gossip, should also be legal.
Right.
So I'm distinguishing between blackmail, which I don't favor, but I favor the legalization of, and extortion, which I also don't favor, and I also think should be prohibited by
Yeah,
law.
and since you're making a point, making it clear that hey, you don't necessarily favor these things like prostitution, though, but there are current laws that you would be speaking against that criminalize this type of thing, right?
Yeah,
This
I
is you're
think-
speaking against the injustice of this, not speaking in favor.
Precisely.
That women
And-
go
and
down
that's-
that pathwork.
And that's a hard thing to get across to a lot of people. They think that if you want to legalize something, you favor it, you like it. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe, yes. But in these cases, I certainly don't favor those things.
Is there and there's laws against blackmail, not the extortion of
Oh,
money,
yes. Oh,
but
yes.
I'll show your
There are laws against
wife this picture.
There
Yeah,
are laws
okay.
against blackmail.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Now the no, I didn't know that. Like the Canada and the States, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know about Canada, but in the U.S., there was this black guy who was, what's his name? He was like the father figure. I can't think of his name. And his daughter blackmailed him to give her money.
Right.
And she was accused and indicted and convicted of blackmail.
Yeah. In a society too, where you don't have like well, that's a bad thing, and people just think, well, that's a bad thing. So anything that I don't like, there should be a law. Yeah. It's just like any whim. Law. There's ways in a society where this type of behavior, if we disvalue it, can be discouraged. There can be social ostracism. This person's an asshole. He blackmails people, and so there's a way to curb these kind of behaviors if they're undesirable, right?
Precisely. And also, we could have a condominium association, and in our condominium association, we won't allow prostitution. So if you want to be a prostitute, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
So don't think that there's going to be a house of ill repute or everywhere. There might be a red light district or something like that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't want their kids to be seeing prostitution taking
And what are
place.
some other examples of unjust laws that are behavior that might be considered seedy or whatever, but is unjust to be?
Well, let me take a look at the book.
Yeah, you got the book there, right?
Drugs
yeah.
would be another one. Another one, advertising. People are against advertising. There's even yelling fire in a crowded theater. Justice Holmes in the U.S. was saying, well, yeah, we favor free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Well, you can if you have a sadomasochistic theater, and instead of beating each other, what they do is they yell fire and then they all crush at the exits. As long as there's no fraud, as long as it's announced that this is an SM theater,
Yeah.
why shouldn't you
Now,
allow that?
these are very theatrical and esoteric examples, but it hammers the point home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
gypsy cab driver, person who will drive without availing himself of the cab licensing laws.
All right. Okay.
Look, in order to drive a cab around Vancouver, you have to get a permit.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to drive my car, and I'm not getting any permit from anyone. Did I violate the Libertarian Code? No.
No.
And yet I go to jail for it.
Yeah. Or you can multiply these dumbass
Endlessly.
examples.
That's why I got
yeah.
3 books of 40 chapters each. You can multiply. There are so many laws that prohibit things, like take prescription drugs.
Yeah.
Right now, if you're a pharmacist and you sell me a prescription drug without a doctor's permit, you go to jail. Did that violate libertarian principles? Why do you have to get a permission from a doctor?
Yeah.
Doctors should be our employees, not our bosses. So, I mean, the law books are this thick, or I don't know, every year they come up with 5,000 more pages of law. Most of those laws are incompatible with libertarianism. So if I want to write 10 more defending the unoffendable books, I'll have plenty of room.
Well, yeah, but you know what? Like to the whole enterprise of law, and this goes to philosophy. I mean, they make a hash of it. They make a mockery of it, right? And that's the trouble that a lot of people have with the idea of a stateless society, is because a government monopolization has a monopoly on law, which I think formed organically, right, in societies, and they overtook that, So people have trouble understanding the governments have the prestige of law to give them legitimacy. And you can have a stateless society and have laws.
Absolutely. You would hopefully have just laws. You also asked me about my book on roads.
Yes.
Let me talk a little bit about that. In the United States, some 40,000 people a year die on the roads. In Canada, it's about 4,000. Now, just put those numbers in perspective. I mean, how many people died in Uvalde, Texas, where these kids were killed, 2,000 kids, which was a horror.
Yeah.
How many people died in 9/11? 3,000. This is 40,000 people a year dying on the roads.
Yeah.
And
But you mentioned 9/11 in this?
9/11, when the New York City was bombed.
Yeah. Well, how is that connecting with the question of roads?
Well, I'm trying to put 40,000 deaths in perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm saying 40,000 deaths, nobody talks about.
Whereas, I understand what you're saying.
Where
Okay, yeah.
a stinking lousy 3,000 people died on 9/11.
Yeah, okay.
Or
yeah.
Katrina, only 1,900 people died. Now look, every life is precious.
Yeah.
And it's a horror when anyone is killed. But let's put this in perspective. This is 40,000 lives lost in the U.S. every year.
I see what you mean. Yeah, people, because that's been advertised in our face, the 3,000 people that died in the parish.
3,000 was
But
horrible.
everybody's all of a sudden quiet on these other questions.
Right.
Like, what about that? Right?
And people think, taxes and road deaths are inevitable, so you can't do anything about it.
I was about to say that in a devil's advocate way. Like, maybe, lousy drivers has nothing to do with the
Right.
road.
What they'll say is lousy drivers, drunken drivers, weather conditions, vehicle malfunction, inattention. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and I should get applause for getting the NHTSA.
We'll get that on the
correct,
soundtrack.
Right. Has, I think, 125 different causes of deaths,
Yeah.
including how far is the road from a hospital? Do the hospitals have helicopters or not? In other words, they're very esoteric in the number of causes of death.
Yeah.
None of them are the fact that it's the government that runs the roads. Whereas in my book, what I'm saying is that those are just proximate causes of the deaths.
Right.
The ultimate cause is the manager. And guess who is the manager of the public roads? Government.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
In order to clarify the difference between proximate and ultimate causes, suppose we go to a restaurant, we're brought in as marketing management people, and we're trying to figure out why this restaurant went broke. Yeah. And what we say is, well, location was on a cul-de-sac, not on a big cross street. The waitress was surly, the food tasted lousy, and the place wasn't clean.
Yeah.
Those are just proximate causes. The ultimate cause is the manager.
Yeah, yeah.
The manager didn't hire a better chef. The manager didn't hire a better waitress. The manager didn't locate in a better place. It's the manager which is the ultimate cause. So all of these...
Ultimately responsible.
Ultimately responsible. Whereas all these other causes, drunken driving, is just a proximate cause. The ultimate cause is the government didn't stop drunken driving.
They failed at the task.
They
yeah.
failed to manage
You
the
could
roads.
be walking in a grocery store and slip on a banana or whatever, and it's not a case of why don't you look where you're going? There could be a
No.
banana on the floor. It's a grocery store after all. No.
No, you go to Walmart and they don't have bananas on the floor, and if they did, you'll go to another place, and they'll learn how to do it. So the idea here is that if you have a road and I have a road, and there are many deaths on your road, but on my road there aren't, because I can deal better with drunken driving and with vehicle malfunction and driver error. Well, look, the reason we have pretty good shirts and shoes and lollipops is because we have competition.
Yeah.
So all I'm doing is applying Henry Hazlitt to roads.
Well, competition, but I was thinking, and tell me if I go askew here, I'm going back to the question of the division of labor and specialization that helps the flourishment, whereas competition is just kind of like a side product of a free market where people are free to specialize and free of physical force to exchange their goods. Competition, they're trying to make the customer happy to retain their business, and let's see if I can screw this guy up and maybe go out of business or whatever. So it's just kind of like a sideline thing. Now, because the government has a monopolization, you don't have specialization. You don't have what's the other one? Sorry,
Division of
the
labor.
division of labor. Yeah, because they're a small cadre of people calling the shots on
By the
so
way,
many
I just
things.
remember the guy's name, Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby.
I couldn't think. His daughter got in trouble with blackmail.
Oh,
to
it was
interrupt
Bill
you,
Cosby's daughter.
But
Okay,
I couldn't
yeah.
think of his name.
Oh,
So
yeah, no, it
get it out.
pops
there.
out and get it out of there.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no, isn't that the cause? Isn't that like would be considered an ultimate cause? Is because you have a government body with a small handful of people ultimately making decisions over millions of people's lives, and they can't possibly be as good as making the shirts and also in the establishment of law, private defense agencies, and security, etc. If that was on a free market, where you have division of labor, specialization, which is the cause of flourishment. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Let me give you one example of what I did in the roads book. Is the first third was all sorts of things that a private road owner could do to make it safer.
And that would be his ultimate objective, because
Right.
he wants the customers that
To
don't want to
make-
kill them.
Right, to make profit. And then the last half of the book was all sorts of objections.
Yeah.
Like there'd be a monopoly, all sorts of objections.
Well, the
road
classic
owner,
monopoly argument.
the
Yeah.
road owner would charge you $1 million to get out on the road, and you'd be trapped in your house.
Yeah.
So those are the objections. But right now, you get on a 3-lane highway, and the minimum speed is 40 miles an hour, and the maximum speed is 70. And if you do 70 in the left lane, there are going to be people whizzing by you, because
Yeah.
they'll be doing 72, 75, 77.
Yeah.
So what I would do, or I would experiment, I would say, well, instead of having that, why don't we have the right-hand lane, everyone has to do 55, the middle lane, everyone has to do 70, and the left lane, everyone has to do 85. Would that be better? And the answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be 50, 60, and 70, maybe 60, 70, and 80. We don't know, but if you try one way and I try another way, and then we can find out which is the best way to have speed limits on the road, we might then be able to save some lives.
Yeah.
And also, you're in the left lane and you're doing 70, maybe it's lane changing, and you're going to cause a lot of lane changing if you do 70 in the left lane.
Yeah.
And maybe on my road, what I'm going to say, if you do that, I'm going to kick your butt. I'm going to really give a big penalty to that. Another one is you see 2 trucks, one truck in front of the other, and it's only 2 lanes going in that direction. And you know that the second truck is going to try to pass the first truck, and it's going to take them 20 minutes to
Yeah.
pass. So what you do is you floor it and you go by at 90 to get past the trucks before they set up their...
Well, these are just all ideas in terms of like engineering and,
Yes.
and whatnot, and it doesn't have to be relying on like a one person, because
Right.
you wouldn't know what kind of ideas would bubble to the surface. I just want to ask, how are you doing, and how are you doing, Daniel, like in terms of your juice there or whatever, and your energy level, Walter?
Oh, fine.
Yeah.
Are
This
the
is cutting
hour-
room floor
Are we at
stuff.
the hour mark?
We are
I
at
was just being caught.
49 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
another 10 minutes.
Yeah,
or
no,
so.
I just thought I'd check in with you and check in with you.
So the idea would be that on my road, I would tell that first truck to let the guy get by
Yeah.
in 1 minute instead of 20 minutes, so that people wouldn't be tempted to, get past the trucks.
Yeah, and so, and you even though there might be like if we ever had like such a society that even permitted that much of the free roads, that's just one idea from Walter Block, and who knows what ideas could come that you didn't even possibly think of.
Right, right. We
Right.
need entrepreneurship. We need competition if we want to reduce the death toll on our roads.
Yeah, and that's the trouble. A lot of people think is like the implementation of this. How can you have private roads and you need that one monopolized body to to do all of that and etc. I have an idea like the everything that we've been talking about, like the privatization, and the famous quote from you, of course, is if it everything moves or
If it
either
moves,
doesn't move.
privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. Everything either moves or doesn't move, so privatize everything.
Right. Okay. Now the word privatization has like very scary connotations to a lot of people, and I've always wondered about that. Like, why is that the case? Why do they feel that way? Right. Um, I think basically the individual, based on like philosophers like Hegel or Plato, they've had like a long line of history of like speaking against the individual and needing an organized society, scientific society as Marx would have it, and things like that. So there's a lot of people who've absorbed these ideas through osmosis. They don't even have to have gone to school to get like a full dose of this kind of thing. They can get it into the culture, and they just spit out these platitudes and don't know where they got it from, right? So just because like the individual, I think, has been so stigmatized and demonized, I think that's the idea of privatization and private markets just sounds so scary to people. Making a buck necessarily means somebody's throat has to get cut, right? So but the fact of the matter is that society produces all the goods. Don't you agree? The governments aren't doing this. Governments come down, and this is where I agree with Rand. The government basically, even her being a small government advocate, she says, what is government? It's this. It's force, right? It deals with the question of force. So uh, the society is, I think, is like a natural organism, if it's civilized at all, where people would naturally gather together and cooperate, and laws have developed naturally. And it's just like language. There is no commissar of any given
Nowadays,
language.
there are commissars. You're not
Of-
allowed to say he. You have to say she.
Well, yeah, okay.
You're not allowed to say, what is it? Colored person. You have to say person of color
Well,
nowadays.
this illustrates the point. Like the attack on language and concepts and words. This is how languages have developed, very organic and naturally along a society where at some point you didn't have commissars. It just all developed naturally, and I see society as the same way as that languages have developed. It had laws and things like that. And as soon as you get this monopolized body, then the ultimate flourishment of that society, because it squashes division of labor and specialization, that makes it less efficient across the board.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are we good? Okay.
No, yeah, we're fine.
Oh, okay. Walter, mention anything else in the books that of your latest book, and also what's some of the objections that you've encountered, especially when there's question of slavery. Okay, that would be. I know that we talked about that last time. Is that something that's still going on, or has that gone to the wayside?
Well,
finally?
what happened was I was interviewed in 2015, I think it was, or maybe 2016. No, 15.
Yeah.
And I later learned it was a hit piece on Rand Paul, Ron Paul's son.
Yeah.
And in 2015, Rand Paul was one of the viable candidates for the Republican nomination for president. Donald Trump got it, but Rand Paul in 2015 was a viable candidate. And what they were doing, the New York Times was saying, well, Rand Paul is a crazy, because he hangs around with crazies, and here are 12 crazies, and
Oh.
look at how crazy they are, and I was one of the crazies.
Oh, you're one of the crazy
I
examples.
was one of the
okay.
crazies. So they were interviewing me about what is libertarianism.
Right.
And they really weren't getting it, either because they were too stupid, which I doubt, or because they
Yeah.
wanted me to say something where you could have a gotcha moment.
Yeah, of course.
So finally, in an attempt to explain the outer reaches of libertarianism, I came up with the voluntary slavery issue.
And once again, just to hammer the point home in perhaps purposely provocative ways, yeah? Would that be fair to say? To
Oh,
make
yeah.
the point clear
Yes.
of speaking against unjust laws.
Right.
Okay.
So the scenario I gave them is, suppose my son, God forbid, had a horrible disease, and the only way to cure him was $20 million to cure him. And I don't have anything like $20 million, but you do. You're Bill Gates. You've got 20 million, you've got multi-zillions, and 20 million for you is nothing.
Yeah.
So we make a deal. Give me the 20 million. I'll give it to my son's doctors. I'll save his life. And now I'll come to your plantation and I'll be your slave. I'll pick cotton, give you economics lessons, whatever you want. You can whip me. You can even kill me because I'll be a real slave, not an indentured servant. I'm a real slave.
Yeah.
Why do I want to do it? Because I value my son's life more than my freedom.
Right.
Why do you want to do it? Because you value my servitude more than the stinking lousy 20 million, of which you've got plenty of money.
Yeah.
So is this a legitimate contract? And under libertarianism, there's a big debate among libertarians as to whether it's valid or not. But I think that this is a valid contract. So I gave them that. Then they came out with their interview, and they accused me of favoring actual slavery.
Actual slavery,
Coercive
plantation,
slavery.
coercive.
You know, real slavery, not this voluntary, philosophical, made-up thing to illustrate what libertarianism is all about, but actual slavery.
Yeah.
So I wrote them and said, could you please have a retraction or a clarification or something? Because I don't favor actual slavery, just theoretical slavery.
This is not
And they
honest.
refused.
Yeah.
So I sued them and we settled. I'm not supposed to say what the settlement was, but we settled. But then a whole bunch of Loyola students wanted me fired from my job because I favored slavery.
Yeah. Or and well, you also have like your views on the women in the workforce, blah blah blah.
Oh, I
all
have a lot
types
of other
things.
views that
Yeah.
are very unpopular. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, why is it that women make less money? Are they exploited? No, they're not exploited.
Yeah.
Different views. So that would certainly be a high point or a low point. But I just wanted to mention one other book, Evictionism.
Yeah.
And here what you have is two of the leaders of libertarianism, Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard.
Yes.
If you had to pick two leaders of the libertarian movement, you could go very far wrong by not picking those two people.
Oh yeah.
And yet Murray and Ron are diametric opposites on abortion.
Yeah.
Murray Rothbard is pro-choice. Ron Paul is pro-life.
Yeah. As I would figure. Yeah. He's a Christian.
Ron Paul is a Christian. He's pro-life. Murray Rothbard is not a Christian, and he's pro-choice. And this is a debate that not only divides the general population of Canada and
But
the U.S.
within the libertarian
and all around the
circles.
world, but within the libertarian movement too. So I wrote a book and a whole bunch of articles. I do a lot of articles in law reviews and places like that, where I proposed a solution. And the solution is called evictionism. So what is evictionism? Evictionism is the idea that both pro-choice and pro-life are wrong.
Wrong.
And the correct libertarian view for abortion is evictionism. So what's evictionism? Evictionism is the idea that you can evict the fetus, but you can't kill the fetus.
Yeah.
Now, I start off...
Because that would be the murder. So
That would be
life
murder.
begins at conception.
So life begins at the conception. Life starts with the fertilized egg. The sperm alone will not become a human being. The egg alone will not become a human being. The fertilized egg, if it's placed in the right place, will become a human being. And I think that that fertilized egg has the rights of any other human being, namely the right not to be murdered.
Yeah.
Now, let's take the case of rape. A woman is walking along the street. She gets grabbed. She gets impregnated. And now there's a person growing inside of her. So how do we as libertarians analyze this? Well, the way I analyze this is I ask, well, who is the owner of the woman's body? And my answer is the woman. And then I say, well, what about the fetus? The fetus is a trespasser. The woman was a peaceful woman walking along the street, and now there's this person inside of her. Well, if there's somebody trespassing in your house, do you have a right to kill him? Now, it's an innocent trespasser. That baby is innocent.
Yeah.
The rapist father is evil, a criminal. But the baby is innocent. Even the baby is a product of rape. So suppose there's an innocent person in your house who I drug a person and I stick him in your house. Do you have a right to kill him? No. But do you have a right to evict him? Do you have to keep him in your house? No. You can push him out of your house.
Yeah.
So I think the woman has a right to push the baby out of her house, namely her womb,
Yeah.
but not to kill the baby.
I appreciate the analogy. Yeah.
Now, it just so happens that in the third trimester, the baby is viable outside of her womb, and she can evict the baby, and the baby will live. But in the first 2 trimesters, given present medical technology, if she pushes the baby out, the baby will die. But her right to property right is more important than the so-called right to life of the baby, because there is no such thing as a right to life, because that's a positive right. And libertarianism does not recognize positive rights, only negative rights.
Yes.
You have a right not to be murdered, right not to be raped, not to be stolen from, not to be kidnapped or whatever. But you have no right to food, clothing, or shelter, because that means whenever you have a right, other people have an obligation. And if you have a right to life, I have an obligation to feed you.
It becomes a logical absurdity,
Precisely.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a compromise position. In the last trimester, we're taking the pro-life stance. In the first 2 trimesters, we're taking the pro-choice stance. But it's a compromise based on principle, namely property rights.
Yeah.
Whereas a non-principled compromise would be, I say 2 plus 2 is 4, you say 2 plus 2 is 6. So we compromise and we say 2 plus 2 is 5. It's a compromise, but it's not principled, because you can't deduce 2 plus 2 equals 5 from anything.
Right.
It's wrong. Yeah. Whereas you can deduce evictionism from private property rights. Now let's take the case of voluntary sexual intercourse. People say, okay, rape, evictionism, you may have a good point, let's say. But how about voluntary sexual intercourse? The mother invited the baby in. And when you invite the baby in, you just can't...
Well, once again, you're responsible.
I'm sorry?
You're responsible.
Right, you're responsible. I mean, if you invite someone into your house or into your airplane, you invite me into your airplane, you just can't kick me out at 30,000 feet. So the question is, does voluntary sexual intercourse constitute an invitation? And my claim is that it doesn't. Yeah. Because remember, life starts with a fertilized egg. By the way, in the Jewish tradition where life starts? When you graduate medical school. That's
right.
Right. I'm just kidding about that. No. Actually, it starts with a heartbeat, but I don't follow the Jewish tradition on that. So, but the point is that life doesn't start until the fertilized egg occurs. But the sexual intercourse, it takes a while for the sperm to get to the egg. So there is no invitation. So my theory of evictionism applies not only in the case of rape, but in the case of voluntary sexual intercourse.
Yeah. Now, for the longest time, and your argument is unique to me, which I've heard, I guess maybe it was about 4 or 5 years ago now, right? It's unique to me, and for the longest time, and I find it pretty compelling, but for the longest time I was pro-choice. Maybe you would anticipate that, right? Which I was considering to be more in terms of freedom, right? And I based that decision on, because I always went with the argument that prior to the third trimester, or at least in the very first, that it's a potential human being. It will become a human being, but it's not yet a human being. It's a potential human being. So acting the woman to make a decision against her choice, this is an actual human being versus a potential. So that was always my groundwork. Where did I go askew on that? That's the famous debate between the life and the pro is this whole question of when life begins, right?
Well, I stipulate that life begins at the fertilized egg. I mean, some people say life begins only with birth. That was Murray Rothbard's view. But the baby who is a half hour old
Yeah.
out of the womb.
At birth, yeah. I mean, the abortion in the third trimester.
And the baby who is a half hour from being born.
Yeah.
It's the same baby.
Well,
It's just a change of address.
There's some really particularly wacky leftists who advocate even this much, right?
Some
abortion
people say
deserve-
you can have infanticide.
Yeah.
The baby is outside of the womb, and they're willing to kill the baby.
What group is this?
Oh, there are extreme feminists or extreme pro-choicers
Yeah.
that believe you can have an abortion. I think you should never have an abortion because an abortion is an eviction plus murder. You can only have an eviction.
Yeah.
And I think that gives the women, the women's rights people, all that they are entitled to. They're not entitled. See, some women say, well, I don't want that rapist baby to live. The woman has no right to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I could
To
see
make a
it-
decision like over
yeah,
life and
I could
death,
see
yeah.
how she feels that way because that rapist is evil.
Certainly, if she killed him during the rape, the violation in self-defense, that's a different thing
Oh,
altogether.
if the
But
rape
not a
vic-
month later. you
If
know?
the rape victim kills the rapist, I applaud because rape is a crime.
Yeah.
I mean, you always have what do you call it? Continuum problems.
Yeah.
They were drunk, and he thought there was consent, and you know.
Or even like the entering into a person's home. Is this a violent person, or is this just somebody who's confused or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there are always continuum problems. You know, what should be, when do you become an adult? 14, 16, 18? Libertarians don't know that answer. Nobody
well,
knows that.
there's no intrinsic.
No intrinsic cutoff point. It's a gray area.
It's 18. You know, that's
Right.
it,
So
yeah.
there are issues of, is it a rape? But I'm assuming it's a clear rape. The woman still has no right to say, well, I want to kill that baby because I don't want that man's child to live.
Yeah.
All she has the right to do is evict the trespasser. And it's unfortunate that in the first 2 trimesters that baby will die. But as medical technology improves, you'll have earlier and earlier viability. You know that in 500 years, the fertilized egg will be able to live out in a test tube or some super duper test tube, you know, with medical technology.
Yeah.
So if we adopt evictionism eventually, there'll be no problem. But if we don't, the two sides will be clashing forever.
Right. Yeah. 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 I think it really is an understanding of of individual rights coming back. It swings right back to that, because even if the leftists are going to be talking about like the right of this or that, they have to include the entire panorama, the woman and the baby. And I think that your theory does that. It takes all of it into consideration. Whereas the traditional approach is somebody has to lose here, right? Somebody will be the sucker at the face of an injustice. Well, I guess we should wrap up here.
Yeah, it's probably an hour by now.
Yeah, it most certainly is. Yeah, because you've been very generous in your time right now. But to get a good advantage shot of these books, maybe if you wanted to do like the
Yeah, if you don't mind, after we wrap up, I'm just getting some quick shots.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Should we do it now? Hold the book?
Well,
Are we still rolling?
we're
Oh, okay.
rolling, so I
Oh,
don't
okay.
know
Yeah.
if you wanna-
Yeah.
Are you guys good?
Yeah. No, we're good. Yeah, we'll get the we'll get the B-roll stuff, and
Okay.
so we get a good shot of the books. You know, I want your books in.
Sure.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Well, that was an exhilarating conversation.
Yeah. I was gonna have to patchwork that. I think I'll probably like do it in titles. You know, like where we come up on a new subject before we go. I would have like a black screen and the economic theory or the question of evictionism, and then it goes into it, kind of thing, and
I'll leave
digestible.
I'll leave that to you guys.
Yeah. And also this fine drawing here.
Oh, you've got it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tie this up.
Is this guy still rolling?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Since that's still rolling, I got to tell this story, and for your benefit of how I met you. Okay, right? This is going on 10 years now, isn't it? Right?
At UBC.
UBC. Actually, you know what? I'll wait till you get freehand that. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm just switching it up, yeah.
Okay, yeah. What time do you usually go to bed, Walter?
10 or 11.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh no, I was wondering if you're a night hawk like me, or you're a relatively early
Well,
bedder.
10, I don't know, 9 or 10,
Okay.
10:30.
Now to get back to the
You
story.
go to bed much later?
Oh, much later. I'm painting to the late hours of the night. You know,
So you
I'm
get
the
up,
artsy fartsy bohemian
you get
type.
up late then,
Uh,
noon or 1
you know
o'clock.
what? I'm sleeping like 5, 6 hours these
Oh,
days.
wow.
I'm just an engine.
Huh.
Okay, now for everybody's benefit, since I've been talking to you, and who is this guy? You know, Victor. Walter, I was having a debate at the UBC, University of British Columbia, with an individual by the name of Matt Berkowitz. Matt Berkowitz, of course, with the whole zeitgeist movement, where robots or computers or whatnot would be ultimately make the decision allocating the resources in society, so everything is equal and on the fair, and not human beings making all these rotten, stupid decisions. You have a scientific socialism, and they disown any terminology of being called communist, but they're collectivists. He's good. He's a cool movie kind of guy. Yeah. So anyway, there I'm debating this guy. I'm just taking it for what it is, collectivism of the violent sort. I mean, he can patchwork it with all the fancy bells and whistles and Christmas decorations of calling it the zeitgeist movement, but I see what it is, and so did you. So anyway, I'm debating this guy, and it's I guess it's just like a crowd, maybe, I don't know how many people were over there, but I was looking up into the rows and just getting a scan of how many people were there, who's here, what's there. And I've known you, I've read your works 20 years, 30 years ago. I know your works, Walter. I've been in these circles. I read all this stuff with Ayn Rand, and moving on to Murray Rothbard and the Spats and David Kelly and Leonard Peikoff. I know all of this, right? So I know your works as well. You even knew Hayek, didn't you, right? Yeah, that's amazing. I saw a photo the other day, by the way, of Hayek and you and somebody else. So anyway, there I am, and lo and behold, who do I see up in the audience? Is Walter Block. And I'm sitting there swallowing my tongue. My heart is actually palpitating, you know, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? And so later on, you graciously introduced yourself. Somebody told you about this debate, like a mutual contact of ours or whatnot. And you came down and introduced yourself. And ever since then, we've had speaking engagements.
I didn't introduce myself.
No?
I have to correct you. I came as a fan to congratulate you on an excellent job in your debate.
You're just saying
I
that.
didn't just say, hi, I'm Walter Block. I said, this was magnificent.
Thank you very much. You got that right.
And I had my son with me.
Your son was there. Then I did meet your son. I didn't
Yes.
even know it. I didn't even appreciate it.
He was
Oh.
much younger then.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How old was he at that time?
I don't know.
Yeah, that is going on like 10 years
I think
now.
it's more than 10. Might be 20. I'm not sure.
Yeah, 20 years. No, I don't
Maybe.
know. I'm
I'm
sure.
not sure.
Yeah, so that's it. So later on, you knew me to be an artist, and in good homage, and with much respect, just to go to show you that caricature does not necessarily have to lappoon people like politicians who deservedly rich it. But I did this drawing, which I see that is in your home, and it heartens me greatly to know that you probably got this painting, or this rendering rather. It's graphite. That's a fancy word for pencil. So there you go.
It's on my desk. I look at it every day.
Yeah, isn't it? That's a handsome mug. Come on. There we go.